Hi again. So, today I wanted to approach the topic of limiting beliefs, their value, and their detriment. I was thinking about it for a little bit, and I want to say at the start that everything is perfect just as it is. You are absolutely perfect just the way you are. You are representing what is often called like your Buddha nature in this very moment. And that is with all of your limiting beliefs, which often keep us in ignorance, attachment, or aversion. I mean, many times they manifest that way. But even with that being the case, I feel it's important to express an understanding that these limiting beliefs aren't unkind. They're not without reason, not without purpose, not without meaning, not without value. But that a natural part of this perfection seems to be this desire, this yearning to grow and to learn and to know more about our experience, to become more and more self realized. And because of that, we end up approaching and eventually overcoming many of our limiting beliefs, ultimately for our betterment, which I think is the goal of all the cosmos. So, what do limiting beliefs look like? There's some really basic examples that we all can understand, and there's also more subtle examples that maybe not be as limited as they first appear to be. The limitations on some of the latter group, which I'll give examples for both, come from the uh, the more ingrained ones. I mean, ultimately, all our beliefs can be transcended, but there are some that pertain to the grosser elements of nature, namely our physical bodies and their expressions, that really take patience to overcome and aren't necessarily the goal unless you want it to be. That is part of your belief system. Some examples of the grosser elemental expressions of limiting beliefs are words. Words cannot express truly what it feels like to feel almost anything, to feel the emotion of sadness to someone who's never been sad, or to feel the sense of detachment, to feel a sense of oneness. Anything that is deeply personal can only be touched or pointed to with words. They form their own barrier. A lot of these barriers, a lot of these limits seem very, very natural, almost as though reaching the edge of something cycles you back around. Words and feelings are two great examples of these gross, elemental, limiting factors that we ultimately place on ourselves. The body is a clear and obvious one that we face all the time. We see the limitations of our body when we get exhausted from working too much or overextending ourselves or the stress that we put on our nervous system. And eventually, it might not be necessary again, but it is useful to figure out your limitations and how you can transcend them with some of these grosser things as well. But for the finer aspects of life, the more subtle aspects of life, you could see that there is a sense of unlimited or limitlessness in things like awareness, which is something, like I've said before, that we do and then something that we are, can be applied to everything. There is nowhere that awareness cannot fit into. Or there's nothing, rather, that can't fit into awareness. And love. No matter how strong the emotions, attachments, and aversions or ignorance around any person or thing are, any situation are, you have the capacity to share love with whatever it is, to even bring it inside and see it as a part of your own being so that you can offer love in the most intimate way. It might seem hard at first, but the more you approach this idea of compassion and kindness, the more you realize that it, just like awareness, can hold everything within it. And belief itself. That's kind of the whole reason I want to talk about this topic, is because the power of belief, when applied even in a dualistic fashion, is immense, life-changing, world-changing. But belief and its limitations aren't something that we can just say, oh, I believe past my limitations. I believe I could withstand, frozen temperatures, like there's videos of monks doing and stuff, or making heat with their bodies. Even with the techniques that they use, part of it is the belief itself. And we can't deny what's at our core. We can say all day that we believe this or that, but the universe responds to the vibrations that come from within us. Our own actions, right, respond to our core beliefs. Ultimately, you can't really fake it till you make it, because your words aren't powerful enough if they're not coming from a place deep within. This sounds like a limiting belief, right? They're all over the place. But I guess that's one of my limiting factors. Don't necessarily put that on yourself, but intuitively, there are things that we know to be true. Limitations give us the power to say no. They're like a healthy boundary in a difficult relationship. That power to say no, that skepticism, actually strengthens our belief. When people come at us with disagreeing ideas or negative talk, trying to instill doubt, potentially, maybe just because they don't understand, you don't have to accept that. There is real strength in that. And it makes you feel firm in what it is you know to be true, which is a big part of the goal for creating consciously a better world. They can also strengthen not just the belief, but your connection to others too. A lot of times these beliefs are instilled into us, especially religious or spiritual ones, by groups of people. There are plenty of people who will just read the text on their own and not have a sense of community. But that sense of community is really wonderful. It provides a great security to the self that you're not doing this alone and you have people to reach out to and to get help from and to offer help to and to share love with and to grow together. It brings diversity into our life. And because of these things, limiting beliefs actually are of immense value early on. Having a community puts us onto a path. And even though that path ultimately is just part of our own, it still helps us to find usually that path. A lot of the pros for limiting beliefs come early on. They set a foundation. But the idea of transcendence is to transcend all of it, right? To transcend the idea that we own anything, that anything belongs to us, that any person or any temporary item or situation or emotion or thought or personality, sense of self, none of it belongs to us. And that includes our belief systems. For us to get a full experience, eventually we have to let those things go. I'm reminded of, I've talked about him before, but Ramakrishna, who realized at a certain point that his love for the Divine Mother Kali, who he saw in all things, and who he saw materialized before him, was going to have to be destroyed. That the love even that he gave solely to this form of the divine goddess actually trapped him to her, and she would need to, in a way, consume herself, right? She's the consumer of all things. We're all in a room. And she would also need to consume herself for him to transcend even her, right? Even the things that bring us to, in his case, God realization, become limiting factors on our ability to reach ever new newness. If he didn't destroy those factors for himself by cutting up Kali with a sword, then he would have ultimately boxed his beliefs. He would have given himself limitations, and I don't think you can have freedom when you're limited. And that seems to be a big part of this goal, or a big part of like what we're imagined to be reaching for, right? Until you attain instead of continuing to reach, reaching being a limiting factor, is a sense of freedom from all these things. While accepting natural limitations. There's only so much you can share with the world for sure, but that doesn't need to be a limiting factor. That can be a place of strength. If one sticks with their limited belief system laid into the path, there can rise real obstacles. Not towards a sense of well-being or a sense of strength or a sense of power, but towards a sense of actual freedom. A lot of people know all the rules, all the actions you're supposed to take, and don't do it from a place of deep and real devotion. Rather, they do it from a place of superficiality often, a place of pride, jealousy, that is a very difficult poison to approach. It's a hard one to see when you feel like what you're doing is righteous and you know the right way. When you only hold on to one version of not just the truth, but of your truth, you lose often appreciation for all the infinitely varied ways that people can take to get to the same place. Being too hard into these structures that did help build a foundation doesn't allow one to change and to be vulnerable in a way that is really helpful. It can create major blockages in our life, mental, emotional, when we try to do everything the same way forever. There's no holding on to anything like that. We change moment by moment, day by day. When we can step back and see our lives, we can quickly realize that no matter how hard we try to hold on to a personality. Look at last year, or the year before, or the year before. I'm sure you were still you, but that you likely had a whole different belief system that is hopefully expanded. One of the most fun aspects of religion, I think, is seeing the holy madmen, the holy fools of the various traditions. And they usually come along and they act against the pressures, right? They often talk about God being in everything, and the breaking of the rules becomes a norm for them. Or sometimes not even engaging with the rules at all. But people still are magnetized. Much like the placebo effect, which shows the ability to transcend some limitations even in the body, the holy fools of various traditions are treated like flukes. Ramakrishna, who is an example of one, would not do things in order. There's a lot of ritual practice, a lot of order that's necessary or believed to be necessary by a lot of people. And he would go from giving the food to Ma to giving it to the cat because he saw Ma in the cat. But once these people are gone, that's not usually the same continued belief. Amongst the traditions, for example, that he was a part of, you can look and find people who are still very, very hard on the structure and the necessity of the structure to be that which allows someone to achieve these great things. He knew the structures too, but those moments of sitting with Ma, of feeding the cat, and still making an inspiring tale that we can look at today, as my cat goes crazy, are things that can still be lived by all of us and should be. The holy fools often reveal hidden truths that for some reason just get re-hidden. I mean, anyone who was to try to do that after would just look like a copycat and would probably be treated as such. where you have to get to, no one has to do anything. Where a helpful place to try to land. I'm recognizing. One sec. Cal, you hear me talking about cats? A helpful place to try to land is not necessarily having no limiting beliefs and also not trying to be too burdened by limiting beliefs. Is this place I've come to see more and more like living on the edge. Living on the edge of those belief systems allows you to see an idea, at least, of what might be ahead. If you're really to stop believing that you are shy or incapable of doing something, you don't have to accept that you're gonna be super charismatic if you go out, or that you will be able to perform something that you were suddenly unable to do as an expert. Part of our belief system is usually that practice makes perfect, or practice makes better. But when you start to live on the edge and you start to allow yourself the grace to see that, maybe I can do more than I think. And maybe there is more to this life. You realize that living on the edge is one of the kindest things you can do for yourself. You can apply this to others as well and encourage them. Recognize sometimes, right, another person's limitations that might not be real. I think it's called the Tenglin practice is really good. You could breathe in that doubt, breathe in that insecurity, combine it with a recognition of your own so that you're internalizing this, and then breathe out the antidote. Breathe out that courage. Breathe out that sense of true self that can help inspire someone to change. Living on the edge might sound scary and often is a very vulnerable place to be, but it is amazing to see how far you can go. I wanted to sum this up. A lot of these videos I've just kind of been ending, but I wrote at least a little bit and see what comes from this. The idea of limiting beliefs. Really, one of my favorite metaphors that I mentioned early on was that they are like healthy boundaries in interpersonal relationships. We don't need to fly past all our boundaries and with ourselves and be like, oh, mind over matter this, or I could withstand the cold because like I have true belief, right? We need to approach these things with honesty, see where we stand in the core of our being, and use that as an indicator of where our edge might be. It's not loving to knock down our own boundaries. It's also not loving to knock down another person's boundaries. We all have different levels of understanding and interacting with the world, and we should have the grace to meet people where they're at. At the same time, it is not useful to allow others to limit you. A lot of people, as you start to know your own innate truth more and more, will try to box you in. Don't let them. When you stand your ground, they'll either turn and run, which is fine, because maybe your limitations go too far. Or you might help them adjust to a new way of seeing. Ultimately, we can be indifferent to this outcome. The important thing is having that confidence and courage to know where we stand and to make sure no one crosses those boundaries in a more traditional interpersonal way. Looking at our beliefs with a desire to be able to see more of reality and walking forward with curiosity about where these beliefs come from will allow us to be in a place where we are continuously learning about ourselves and growing to be a more complete part of the cosmos. I am grateful for everyone who is tuning into these. I clearly plan to keep making them. I hope to do a lot more creative projects as well, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with the world. So, sending my love. Take care.